Bienvenidos, mis amores, a otro episodio más de Échale Ganas. Contigo, María Flores Correa, fundadora de la División Latina. Y hoy está con nosotros Joe La Rosa, el fundador de la Rosa Realty. Pero antes de eso, no te muevas de ahí, te tienes que quedar hasta el final. Porque hoy vamos a estar hablando de cómo se le ocurrió a Joe hacer esta compañía pública y que ustedes puedan ser hoy socios de la Rosa Realty. Vamos a comenzar nuestra sesión de hoy con una palabra sumamente importante. Esa dosis de inspiración que te quiero dejar hoy se llama proceso. ¿Y por qué proceso? ¿Qué es el proceso? El proceso son esos momentos que tenemos que disfrutar y que no disfrutamos cuando queremos lograr algo. Especialmente en estos tiempos de cambio donde nuestra industria está cambiando y estamos en un proceso continuo y un proceso de adaptación de lo que tenemos que hacer hoy y hay una poca resistencia a lo que queremos hacer y lo que no queremos hacer. Te recomiendo que hoy te medites un poquito en la palabra proceso, porque el proceso es que te va a llevar a los resultados que quieres tener. Cualquier sea tu sueño, vas a tener que pasar por un proceso, ¿ok? Pero recuerda, durante ese proceso no dejes de disfrutarlo, porque al final del día, en la celebración, esas memorias de ese proceso que tuviste es lo que realmente le va a dar valor y sentido a lo que estás haciendo. ¿Ok? Y hoy queremos hablar, Joe, de cómo la compañía La Rosa Realty se convirtió en compañía pública. ¿Cómo fue ese proceso del IPO? ¿Cómo fue ese proceso? Pero vamos a empezar desde el principio. Y esto es Spanglish, ¿ok? No es que yo me va a contestar en español, no estén esperando eso. Él va a hablar en inglés, yo voy a estar hablando en español porque mi público es en español, pero la respuesta que él va a estar dando en inglés, la vamos a estar poniendo los subtítulos en español, ¿ok? Pero antes de comenzar, para los que no lo sabían, Joe es cubano. Recuerden, Joe es cubano. Joe, ¿are you Cuban?
Sí, yo soy cubano.
Cubano, 100% sí. Cubano.
Yo entiendo un poquito, pero no puedes hablar bueno.
Bueno, ok, perfecto. Habla igualito que mis hijos, habla igualito que Matthew. No hay problema con eso. Joe, mucha gente sabe que fuimos a Nasdaq y tocamos la campanita y celebramos, abrimos champaña, pero no conocen el proceso que tuviste tú que pasar, que tuvimos nosotros que pasar para llegar a ese punto de celebración. Vamos a comenzar. ¿De dónde sale esa idea? Joe se levanta un día y dice, quiero hacer la Rosa Realty pública, pero ¿cómo fue eso?
It's kind of a unique story. So during COVID, we were always, as a company and our success over the years, we've always been approached by other real estate companies on a much larger scale, right? At national level, where they would want to approach us and see, are we open to some kind of a merger, partnership, alliance? And so there was one company that had literally just completed their IPO. They had just gone public. And one of the challenging times during COVID, of course, in the markets, there was a lot of uncertainty. And I was impressed. I didn't know there was a possibility for us as a company with the size that we were at the time that we can even be a candidate to go public. I thought you have to have, $500 million in revenue and all of these, different, points that we hadn't yet achieved. And so when I started to kind of, understand how this one company was able to go public, it like a light bulb went off in my head. And I remember it was July of 2020, right? In June, they had first approached me. July, we finally had some conversations and I was in my studio at my home office because during COVID, of course, right? Mm-hmm. So I had to, redesign a part of my house to make it kind of my own home office and studio. And I remember getting off the Zoom with them and, looking over at my wife who was there in the room with me. And I said, gosh, if this company just did this, why can't we do it? And one of my goals has always been to be able to create the opportunity for agent ownership. You know, I really wanted to be able to, you know, really as kind of part of my legacy, you know, to be able to help everybody within our company as we grow the company together, everyone can benefit from it. So I started to really, you know, get intrigued, and I started like just asking around, and I went from, you know, one person to one person. And I kind of felt at one point I was hitting a dead end where I wasn't really getting the answers that I was hoping to get. And but throughout all that time, I didn't give up. I knew there was going to be a way. And I remember now, this is December 1st of 2020. I had told my marketing director at the time, I said, look, you know what, let's announce the entire company that, and let's do it on social media. We'll do it on Facebook. We'll do a live feed. And I'm going to make a major announcement. And I did. And we talked about that we're going to create the opportunity for agent ownership. And immediately afterwards, my phone was literally ringing off the hook, text messages, everybody from, you know, my partners to other team leaders to top agents. Joe, this is amazing. Like, how are you going to do this? And to be honest with you, I had no idea how I was going to do it. But I knew that if I put it out there in the universe and I said it publicly, that's, I guess, my DNA, right? I've always been like, if I put it out there, I'm going to find a way to make it happen. And so, you know, I knew that at that point, then I was going to turn this idea into a reality. And, you know, one thing led to another. And then finally, I was able to make some headway. Met some folks in New York that introduced me to other, you know, individuals that had the ability, had the connections. And through introductions, I had the ability to put together a team that kind of then quarterbacked me throughout the entire process. So it was something I just, you know, was very blessed to have the opportunity to be able to achieve.
Yeah, pero vámonos por parte.
Okay.
Diciembre, se le prende el bombillo. ¡Pum! Yo voy a hacer la compañía La Rosa Realty pública. Recuerdo que en el retiro del 2021, él junta todo su liderazgo y nos propone, ¿verdad? A todos nosotros vamos a hacer un IPO. Señores, no tenía ni idea de lo que yo estaba hablando. Un IPO. ¿Qué querrá decir yo con IPO? Pero todo lo que estábamos ahí, recuerdo que yo fui la primera. Sí, vamos, nos vamos a hacer millonarios con esto. So, cuando te venden esa idea que ¡fuan! Y realmente nada más no es la idea, es con quien tú estás trabajando, en quien tú confías, quién es tu partner, ¿verdad? Digo, si se le ocurrió algo bueno va a salir de esto. So, IPO es ese proceso de convertir la compañía privada en pública. So, eso es lo que IPO, para los que no saben o no entienden nuestro lenguaje que estamos hablando ahora mismo. So, pero ahí empieza el proceso, cuando todos decimos sí vamos a hacerlo, y empieza el proceso. En ese proceso que, como dijiste, no tenías mucho conocimiento de cómo lo ibas a hacer. Cuéntanos un poco de cuál fue ese proceso.
Right.
Porque fue más largo de lo que esperaba, ¿cierto?
No,
y hubieron muchas cosas que pasan y que van a pasar. ¿Cuál fue ese proceso? No fue fue costoso.
Right.
A lot of money.
Right.
Más tiempo. So, ¿cómo fue ese proceso?
So let's just backtrack for a moment. So December 1st, 2020, I make the major announcement. We're going to find a way to create agent ownership. And so, yes, to go back to what you said, when I was analyzing all the different routes that we can go, I felt like trading on one of the major platforms, whether it's New York Stock Exchange or Nasdaq, was going to create that opportunity. It was the best way for us to be able to offer that. So then I had to do my due diligence and homework and understand, okay, well, what's the process going to be like? And so everyone that I spoke to, so look, now remember, this is now we're getting into January 2021, right? So the market is still a great market, both the public market and the real estate market. And so everybody said, look, it'll take you maybe 6 months, right? It's going to cost you X, Y, Z amount of money. And this is what the process is going to be like. So I immediately then called together all my partners and, all of, the key, leaders within the company. And I remember we actually were in Costa de Este in Vero Beach. And we said, look, here's this idea I have. And really, I went into that meeting, I didn't know what the outcome was going to be like. And I said, this is the first step in this process, is getting everybody to really understand kind of what the vision is and why we want to do this. And so we had great results. Everybody was excited. They said, this is amazing. I remember, you were like, yes, this is exactly what we need to be able to do now moving forward. And then, of course, we began the process. And so now we had franchised the company, so we weren't all underneath one umbrella. And that was probably the biggest hurdle that we had to overcome, was in order for us to really be able to gain a lot of momentum right out the gates, we had to find a way to kind of, come back together. Even though we were still together, but we weren't officially together. So I started to kind of then design a way that we can do so and everything else. But the problem was that it was just such a tedious process because we had to go through audits and we had to go through, certain filings that we had to do by a certain timeline. And if we missed a date, then we had to start over and we lost 30 days or we lose 60 days. So long story short, I mean, we went through that whole process probably for about a good, we met in like March of 21. We all agreed that we're going to do this. It was really like April or May. We kind of said, all right, green light, let's move forward. And then now it's getting into, October, November, and we were hoping to be done by the end of 21, and it wasn't happening. And then we carried over into 22, and then that's when the market started to shift a little bit, right? Not just the, real estate market, but the public markets as well. And so I remember I had my daughter who was, following me around, and she wanted to do like a little documentary on the whole process. And, she was filming me in different meetings. And one day she's in my office, and I have up on the TV, I had CNBC on talking about things that are happening in the market that day and everything else. And this is now in first quarter of 22. All of a sudden, a report came out. This is the lowest quarter in the last 20 years in the United States of IPOs closing. And she literally was filming it and then filmed me and my reaction. And I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, are you kidding me right now? And that was kind of like the beginning of, all right, this is going to be a process. It's going to be a much longer process than we initially thought. And so, I had a lot of folks that were telling me, listen, maybe just take a time out, maybe, go off to the sideline for a moment, let things kind of settle down. And I was just saying, no, this is our opportunity. I want to get in, even if it's at the bottom. I'd rather get in at the bottom than get in at the top, because I know at the bottom now we can then kind of grow together and ride that wave back up. So we kept going through the process of the audits and talking to different investors and bankers. And finally now obviously it didn't happen in 22. We were trying to, get it packaged together. But at the time, then basically there was a timeout, no more IPOs. This is summer of 22. And so I had to make another difficult decision. All right, what do I do? Right? Do I wait for the fall market to come back to see if there's any opportunities? I said, let's do it. Let's keep moving forward with the audits. We had the opportunity then in early 23, now January 23, to actually present. And again, running into difficulties, right? There was no money out there. No one was investing into IPOs, especially into a real estate company, because at the time, interest rates were climbing. There was a lot of uncertainty. And even though our model really was a model that was going to stand out and actually was thriving in a difficult market, there was still a lot of speculation. So, again, I did not want to give up. My whole life, I have been very resilient. And when I have a goal, I know that, there's nothing that's going to get between me and the goal that I want to achieve. And there was a purpose behind the goal. And that's one of the things that I've taught for years, is that if you really want to be able to be successful and achieve, the results that you want in life, there's got to be a reason for it, right? There's got to be a purpose. And my purpose was really for all of you. Like I sat there in Vero Beach with all of you. I made a promise that we can achieve this great milestone together. And it's going to open up so many more opportunities, not just for us as a company and for us individually, but as well as for all of our agents. And because I went back in December 2020 and told all of our agents that we were going to do this, I was just not going to give up, right? And thank God, because all of you were very committed. You believed, you were just as committed. You had the vision that I had. So finally, then, now as we kind of go through 23, when I was still getting no's, I was still getting people saying no.
Let me get back a little bit.
Yeah.
Porque en el proceso, ahora cuando lo contamos, se ve muy lindo. Pero en ese proceso, Joe perdió su papá.
Right. Yes.
Perdió empleados. Right. Perdió amigos.
Yeah.
Right. Perdió dinero.
Lots of it.
Pero siguió adelante. So, de todo ese, y hubieron muchas ocasiones en las que te quisiste rendir.
Right.
De todas esas que te mencioné, amigos, razones personales, razones de dinero, porque acuérdense, él acaba de decir, es un proceso que él no conocía, que él estaba realmente aprendiendo en lo que iba, con un grupo de personas que lo estaban apoyando, un grupo de personas que se retiraron, otro grupo de personas que te van a decir que sí, van a haber mucha gente que te van a decir que no, van a haber mucha gente que te van a decir tú eres loca, cómo lo estás haciendo, porque sigue, tú eres terca, te encanta gastar dinero y sigues apostando dinero y sigues invirtiendo. Cuando estás realmente con un propósito, y me gustó esa palabra que dijiste, propósito. Cuando conocemos el propósito, el llamado, como tú lo quieras poner, de lo que estamos haciendo y por qué lo estamos haciendo, realmente eso es lo que te va a dar la fuerza para tú seguir en ese proceso. Pero el proceso no es fácil. El proceso va a tener un precio. Siempre va a haber un precio a pagar para tú llegar a la cima, para llegar a esa meta final. Ese precio que pagaste, de todo lo que te mencioné, ¿cuál sería el que más te impactó, que se quedó contigo? Que ese fue el día que dijiste, ya hoy yo no quiero ser realtor, ya hoy me importan me peleé con María, me peleé con fulana, me peleé con otro, porque van a haber días que te vas a levantar y que tú no quieres seguir. So, ¿qué te impactó de ese proceso o qué se te quedó en la mente? ¿Cuál fue ese momento?
There was a lot of moments where I was, questioning, why am I doing this? Do I keep moving forward? Do I keep?
It's worth it.
Yeah. Do I keep, putting so much at risk? I kind of felt like, everyone jokes about like when they go to like the roulette and if they gamble, you put it on red or you put it on black. So my wife and I always say, hey, we put it all on blue. And we were like, all right, let's just make it happen. And, honestly, look, I said, obviously it was, all of you, the commitment that I made to all of you, to all the agents, but really it was, when I had those moments of kind of weakness or those moments of feeling like I'm in like darkness, it was my kids. And I don't want to get like emotional when I say this, but, I knew that my kids were watching everything I was doing. And they may not have been telling me, hey, Dad, like I understand what you're going through, but I knew they were observing. And I wanted to see them or have them see me in a position where I wasn't going to give up. And I regardless of what was being said, regardless of, listen, I had people very close to me that were questioning me, and they were like, what are you doing? Why are you putting the company in this position? Like, why are you spending this money? Like, it's not worth it. And I did not want to give up because I wanted my kids to see that in life, if you truly want to achieve something and you truly, truly have a purpose behind it, you can achieve it. Don't give up, right? Don't, you have to be resilient. And I always tell the story, look, I failed my real estate test 5 times. And so that shows you that I was resilient. I didn't want to give up. I kept taking it over and over again. And I had no real reason back then to even get my license, but I wanted to achieve that goal. So, my kids was they were a big driving force when I had those moments of weakness and people questioning me and everything else. But, and I remember like when I finally achieved that goal, I got emotional multiple times, but the time that I got emotional was when I told my kids that, hey, like I did it, like we achieved this, and that was powerful.
So, pero en el proceso hubieron un precio a pagar profesional,
right,
y un precio a pagar personal.
Right.
Ahora que puedes revisar, te paras y revisa todo el proceso que hiciste. En lo profesional, ¿qué harías distinto? Porque te costó dinero.
Mm-hmm.
Te costó dinero. Recuerdo que tuvimos que contratar un CFO y después otro CFO.
Right.
Hasta que dimos
Went through a couple
con el que
CFOs.
tenemos ahora.
Yeah.
Hubo personal que te dejó tirado también.
Mm-hmm.
En lo profesional. Porque esto es algo importante que lo entendamos. Siempre va a haber un precio a pagar, siempre van a haber gente detrás de ti que te van a decir, no sigas invirtiendo, no vale la pena, ¿para qué estás pagando esto? ¿Por qué pagas a alguien que te grabe? Mejor grábate tú, trata de ahorrarte en esto, trata de ahorrarte en otro. Cuando tú revisas, cuando te puedes sentar ahora a meditar y revisar ese proceso en lo profesional, ¿qué hubieras hecho distinto?
I mean, look, it was, I risked a lot, right? And so I put a lot at risk. I put, and I know you're saying from a professional standpoint, but it's also affects personally because obviously if the business would have suffered, if the business would have been no more, right? Personally, I would have been dealt a serious blow, right? My family would have as well.
What have you been doing differently? Maybe research, maybe take the time to really hire someone that you really trust.
Yeah, there was nothing. Honestly, it was, and this was what kept me somewhat, I would say, centered and really staying focused was that it wasn't me, right? It wasn't because I was doing something wrong or I wasn't prepared. It was just the environment around me. It was out of my control. And, I remember, in fact, I mean, there were so many little things that happened along the way that were completely out of my control. In fact, it was 2 days before we were supposed to close the IPO. In fact, actually, take it back a week or two before, we knew we were about to close, and then all of a sudden the government goes into a potential shutdown. In fact, I think they did get shut down for a few days. And all of a sudden they were like, wait a second. Now, Joe, if the government doesn't reopen, like we can't close the IPO, and all of my investors that I had lined up, there was a potential that they weren't going to want to stay in the deal, right? Because they needed to take their money and put it someplace else so they can get a return. And so that was like, oh my gosh, this is out of my control. The next thing was when we finally overcame that hurdle, literally we were supposed to close. We're thinking about closing on a Friday. And my team said, look, you know what? Let's not push it. Let's not close on Friday. Let's maybe try to close on Monday. That way we have more time to get everything done. And so on. I said, all right, fine. And I remember this. They said, Joe, listen, you have nothing to worry about. Unless a war breaks out, you're totally fine. And I'm like, all right, great. So I remember I'm sitting at home now on Saturday. This is the day after. I'm 2 days away now from closing. And my brother-in-law says, Joe, do you see what's going on TV? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it was literally like the war that was going out, in Israel and all this. And it was just like, are you kidding me right now? And I'm like immediately calling my attorney saying, listen, you see what's going on TV? Is this going to affect the market? So there were all these different things that were out of my control that I just had to stay focused and knew that, you know what, I can only control what I can control. And honestly, my wife has always been an amazing coach for me. And she's always been a reminder, say, listen, do you have faith? Like, are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? Yeah, of course I do. Well, then have faith in God, right? Just know that it's God's will, and you just have to just be committed and just have faith. And, that's what I had to do.
So then let's move on to the process. We create the process, hicimos el proceso, pasamos el proceso, pagamos el precio por el proceso, ¿verdad? Y todo lo que están alrededor de lo que fue este proceso, todos pagamos un precio. Claro está, el llamado, el propósito, la visión la tenía Joe y teníamos lo que creemos en él y lo que confiamos en él y lo que decidimos, porque esto fue una decisión de apostar a que sí se podía hacer esto. Todos pagamos un precio, ¿verdad? De franchise, ahora somos partners otra vez, tuvimos que vender para atrás y fue algo que lo decidimos hacer porque sabíamos que al final del día era lo correcto para todos los agentes. So, cuando estás en el medio de una decisión, de un proyecto, de lo que sea, de un sueño, de un llamado, como tú le quieras decir, siempre van a haber personas afectadas. So, muchas veces no vas a poder tomar la decisión personal por ti, para ti, por lo que pasa por ti. Si no hay otras personas atrás, que era lo que estaba diciendo yo. Hicimos esto para nuestros agentes. So, me guste o no me guste, tengo que seguir el camino y tengo que llegar ahí. Y nos vamos a poner de acuerdo y vamos a hacer lo que tengamos que hacer, porque al final del día esto fue hecho para poder beneficiar a que todos los agentes de la Rosa Realty hoy puedan ser dueños parte de la Rosa Realty como tal y abrirle una herramienta para que ellos también puedan crecer. No solamente nosotros crecer, pero que ustedes también puedan crecer con nosotros. So, Joe, llegamos al día.
Right.
Okay, llegamos al día de que coordinamos el tocar la campana en Nasdaq y por poco me quedo fuera porque estaba en un crucero. Si no estás en el crucero también, recuerdo que comentaste que llegaron el día y pusiste la fecha para ir a New York y todos tuvimos que salir corriendo, comprar vuelo, comprar hotel y llegar ahí. ¿Cómo te sentiste? ¿Cuál fue, cómo empezó a sentirse de que, aunque abrimos en octubre y no tocamos la campana en octubre, pero ya estábamos públicos, estábamos cotizando en la bolsa de valor en octubre, ustedes lo vieron, y la champaña y todo, pero llegó ese día que todos, cada vez que nos reuníamos a la mesa, decíamos, no, todos vamos para Nueva York y vamos a abrir una champaña y vamos a tocar la campana, y ya se hizo realidad. ¿Cómo fue esas emociones?
It was surreal. It was very surreal. I mean, listen, we went public in October, and it was like the moment we went public, I had very little time to even celebrate and to kind of like let it like to sink in, because it was immediately, let's get to work, right? And let's get to work and focus on growing the company and getting the opportunity now to perform. And so in that moment of being there at Nasdaq, I remember when, that entire day, I can kind of compare it to like your wedding day, right? Something is really big is going to happen. It could become, it's going to be life-changing. It's a proud moment in your life. And, everybody, it was funny because they called me a few days before. They gave me very little notice, which I knew that was going to happen. And they said, look, I know, your majority of your company's from Florida. So if they can't all make it, we understand. We can do up to 75 people. But, if you got 20 people there, that's still great turnout. We had more than 75 people there.
75
right?
People.
So that wasn't a problem for us. Like the entire family said, we're in, let's do this. And so like, seeing everybody there in New York and like, I had that day, I kept myself very busy. I had multiple meetings throughout the day in the city talking to different folks. And then finally, when I showed up at Nasdaq and then walking into the market site and then starting to see all of you there, that's when I was like, all right, I was holding back like the emotions. And, then when they called me up to the podium and everybody was there, and it was awkward because like, everybody was putting me at the center of the attention, right? Like I was the one speaking, but this was a group effort, right? Mm-hmm. This was a family, that came together and said, hey, look, we have this amazing goal that we can achieve together. And so like, I didn't want the spotlight all on me. And so I'm looking at all of you there, as I'm about to start to speak, and literally I felt like I was like, it paused for like minutes. It was, I go back to watch the video, it was like 2 seconds, but literally I'm looking at everybody, and it was just like this amazing like feeling of like, we did it. Yes. Like we did it, yes. Now we're not done. We're not done for exactly. Sure. But it was like, it was probably the first time in the whole, process and journey that we've been on, even when we closed it in October, it was the first time that I felt like, all right, like I could celebrate a little bit, right? There's still work that needs to be done. So it was just an amazing feeling, very surreal. And, it was probably definitely, besides obviously my kids being born, the day I met my wife, the day I married my wife, it was definitely right up there with one of the greatest moments of my life to be able to have that opportunity to share it with all of you, right? Because if it wasn't for all of you, coming together and believing what this company truly can achieve together, we wouldn't have been able to, achieve it.
Fue ese momento que todos soñamos y que tal vez cuando hacemos el recuento, me imagino que te pasó a ti cuando estabas parado ahí, de que toda la gente que se fue, la gente que habló, la gente que no participó, el dinero que invertí, las noches que no dormí, todo es como en un momento que dice, wow, it's worth it, valió la pena, estamos right. Aquí, lo hice, lo logramos. Pero tiene un precio, todo tiene un precio y todo tiene un proceso y todo tiene un aprendizaje. De todo eso, el aprendizaje mayor, si lo pudieras compartir, ¿qué aprendiste? ¿Qué pudieras compartir y que le puedas decir a los agentes que no están viendo, que están medio de un proceso tal vez ahora mismo de adaptación, de cambio de la industria, de lo que está pasando? ¿Cuál es ese mayor aprendizaje que le quisieras mandar a ellos?
Just don't give up. I mean, don't give up. Be resilient. I actually had a investor kind of give me this analogy, and it really kind of like hit home where, he said, look, in life, if you want to achieve something, there's going to be like ups and downs, right? And he kept like doing this, and he goes, what does this look like? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, think about it, right? You're going to have ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. He goes, that's a heartbeat, right? if you want to be able to just to have a level of just certainty and to be able to be comfortable, it's kind of like a flat line. So he goes, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to have a heartbeat or do you prefer to have the flat line? Mm-hmm. And I says, no, I want the heartbeat. And he goes, look, anything in life, you're going to have ups and downs. So it's like when you're in that valley, you're in that down place, you just got to remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing, right? And what's the purpose? A lot of what we've already said here today, what's the purpose? What is the driving force? What is the outcome that you want to achieve? And just have faith and don't give up, because there were plenty of times, like we've said here today, I could have given up. I could have very easily have, said, all right, you know what, look, my life is set. Like, I'm comfortable. I don't need to put all of this at risk. I don't need to, and not just financially, but just the relationships that I was kind of putting at risk, because I had a lot of, folks that were believing in me and were making the commitment to achieve this as well. And they were relying on me to get it done. So just don't give up, be resilient, have faith. And if you really want to achieve something, there's got to be a purpose behind it.
And in Spanish will be Echale Ganas.
Okay.
Échale ganas. So, échale ganas, no te rinda. Recuerda que todo al final del día va a tener una celebración. So, tienes que vivir el proceso para poder celebrar. So, la celebración no viene si realmente no pasas por este proceso. Y cada vez que te pienses rendir, recuerda estas palabras: échale ganas. So, levántate, échale ganas, sigue adelante y al final del día vas a tener esos resultados que deseas. Recuerda, gracias Joe por estar aquí con nosotros, ¿verdad? Una vez más. Recuerda lo que siempre decimos al final de nuestro programa: cuando deja que Dios entre en tu negocio, en tu vida, en tu proyecto, en lo que sea, Él entra y te bendice. So, sigamos echándole ganas y te espero en el próximo episodio de Échale Ganas.